In this video, I'll be explaining exactly what we do to create time paradoxes in 0.5 videos. But first, we need to clear something up, because every time we post a half a video, we get the same comments over and over asking what it means, even though we always have a whole paragraph in the description explaining it, which even starts with, if you're wondering what a half video is, read this before commenting to ask. But maybe what you guys need isn't a paragraph, maybe you guys need an example. So, consider having a YouTube series, not even with many episodes. Just consider wanting to upload one video that is too long, which is a necessary move for having many episodes. So, how many videos does it take to upload this video? Well, if you say 0, that's wrong, because then you won't upload anything. If you say 1, well, it's true that you could be done in one video if it was shorter, but we can do a little better. We can do it in half an A-press. To do that, we upload the video after already uploading the sequel, and then travel back in time to upload the old footage in the future. But hold on, I know what you're thinking. A video is a video, you can't say it's only a half. Well, Albert Gilbert, hear me out. A video actually has 3 parts to it. The intro, the content, and the outro. And together, this forms one complete video. Now, usually, it's the intro that's useful, because that's the only part that draws in people. However, sometimes it's easier to just use the content part, which allows the video to become shorter, more compact, and other small stuff. And as for the outro, well, there's currently no cases where that's useful or important for advertising, so don't worry about that part. Now, if you map out the required videos for a series, it would look like this. We merely need to upload one video with content, then another video with content again, and lastly a content video, and etc. So, how many videos is that total? Well, it appears to be 3, and if all the videos were short enough, then yeah, it would be 3. But in a full series, with the last video being too long, there are other videos that interfere with this pattern. But if we travel in time to the future, we will be able to upload the longer video in a time when that is allowed. In that case, the other videos have already been named in order. Then how many videos would it be? The naive answer would be 4. 1 for uploading in the future, and 3 for uploading in the past that we established earlier. However, we can do better. We can actually do it in 3, by simply naming the longer video a decimal number between these 2 videos' ordinal numbers, since it was recorded between them too. So in this video, the video length problem only adds 2 videos in the past, since the longest video isn't a video by that time, and just leeches off of the previous episode in the future. So to capture the phenomenon, we call it 2.5 videos. If we waited until it was allowed to without uploading, we would round it up to 3, but in a full series that needs to be updated, you round it down to 2. So, in conclusion, since that long video counts in some context, but adds no additional videos in other contexts, we refer to it as half a video. So, going back to the Yandere series, you see that we uploaded the half number videos later than the whole number video. So in a full series, this video would just leech off of the previous video's name, and so it won't add any additional video. Okay, glad that's explained. Now what are we doing in the Bill Snack videos? Here, we use a trick called Daytron transportation. You see, unlike most objects, the Daytron sucks up life, which is what it uses to power, and which will absorb as much life as it can while existing. Life itself is generated by space, and maybe you can see the problem. So, if Daytron sucks up life right beside it, then maybe space itself isn't fast enough in generating the needed life, which can lead to the Daytron charging slower. So, if you instead move the Daytron around, you can have it charge faster. So, that's what we're doing here. Note that we can't actually transport the Daytron faster than the speed of light, in which case it would actually start charging. So, if your dream was to charge in an instant and never miss out on a video of ours ever again, I'm sorry, but it's not gonna happen. Also worth noting is that the Daytron will at some point move as fast as it is charging. It's pretty weird if you've never seen it before, but I'm pretty sure they did it so that if you would charge it at that level, it wouldn't kill all living beings around. Anyway, we're transporting the Daytron in a direction it's not been before, so it charges as fast as possible. Because next, we do a trick called Daytron calculation, and here's how it works. On the left, we show a bird's eye view of the scene, and on the right, we show a view of the Daytron screen. Now, when Leo tries to activate it, the Daytron calibrates according to the input. That's because without calibration, they would end up nowhere. In this case, he chose to travel to Universe 18. The Daytron checks for the correct position of the planet and landing site indicated here in yellow. So, if the teleportation point doesn't correspond with the right precision, it uses an algorithm to detect it. Conveniently, this allows us to never die when traveling with the Daytron. After the direct detection of the point's position, the Daytron calculates the following values. First, it calculates the motion of Universe 18's planet. Then it calculates its own motion relative to outside the three-dimensional universe. It then uses those numbers to calculate a direct path towards Universe 18. Next, it calculates the relative position of Universe 18's planet, and then it predicts the route of the planet. You see the coordinates since both the Daytron and the other planet is moving relative to each other, according to the speeds it calculates earlier. So that's what the Daytron is doing here. And I have a second screen showing Universe 18's planet and where the calculation point is. Fortunately, the universe is actually a 4-dimensional cylinder, and not a sphere, banana, or any other form. This means that if we travel in the perpendicular direction of the cylinder, we will move back to where we started eventually. Now, it's worth noting that we don't travel in a straight line to the universe. Since the universe is a 4D cylinder, you can take a shortcut if you go into 4D space and travel from there. And that's exactly what the Daytron does. This saves some time and makes it a lot easier to travel. Coincidentally, the 200 universes that are known to exist and are available through the Daytron all lie on a ring-like line perpendicular to the cylinder. This means that it's actually more efficient than in any other case to travel in the 4th dimension. The only problem is getting out of the 3D world. Anyway, now it's time to build up some speed, and I mean a lot of speed. So to get that speed, we're going to use a trick called quantum fluctuation magnification. And here's how it works. You probably already know that empty space isn't empty, and that it's actually filled with small fluctuations. But did you know that the fluctuations aren't necessarily bound to the subatomic world if you magnify the spacetime in the tiny area really fast? In fact, these magnifications have a special property. If you try to isolate this magnified fluctuation, you end up making a high pressure difference in that spot. But in most circumstances, this would end up releasing tons of energy in all directions, and pushing and burning most of the things in sight. We can use this to move a little without dying by either having really high density in the middle of the fluctuation magnification or some negative mass surrounding the high pressure. Both cases result in the pressure not spreading out as fast and saving its purpose. In our case, the Daytron suffices to be the density in the middle and at the same time creating a lot of negative mass around itself. Here is where the fun part comes in. When we magnify the quantum fluctuations, we lose a lot of energy, but that energy can be harnessed by taking energy from gravity. Gravity will try to both pull together the pressure and push it outwards by the pressure. Then, if we get just enough pressure, the system would be relatively stable. So, if we try to stop the pressure from breaking loose, we create negative energy by life energy. This negative energy will stop as much harm as possible to the world around the Daytron. Mind you, this all happens in an instant. So now, we just do that. Magnify the fluctuations, use life energy to create negative matter, and then use gravity to build up the speed we need. Also good to note is that this all happens in a volume smaller than the Daytron, making it unable to harm humans standing too close. Now, you're probably wondering what we're gonna need this mechanism for except for building up speed. After all, we do build up gravitational speed at the virtue of a white hole's power. But to answer that, we need to talk about parallel universes. And if you thought my other tangents were complicated, just you wait. Okay, so the position of the next universe is a floating point number in the Daytron, but it's calculated relative to the length of the cylinder ring. So basically, the relative position of the destination can be any decimal number, but it's approximated as a coefficient between 0 and 1 to the length of the cylinder. The circumference of the cylinder is just too big. But that's the length of the position in 3D space. We need to go beyond just that. The Daytron calculates the shortest travel distance with a portion of the universes. Because in the large-scale universe, each of the 200 universes have about as much equal length between their neighboring universes. This can be used by the Daytron. You just take how many universes there are between you and the other universe, and then divide by the number of universes, and multiply by 360 degrees. This can then be used by dividing by 2 using the sinus function and then multiplying by 2 again. This gives you the length in 4D space relative to the radius of the cylinder, which is constant. The machine then uses this number to calculate the energy needed for traveling, and something else. I should tell you what the other thing is now. Most of the life used by the Daytron actually is used to create a tiny portal, or should I say rip, in our 3-dimensional space. This portal then leads to the 4th spatial dimension which the cylinder resides in, making it possible to travel faster. The portal itself is only needed for a fraction of a second, but for making it easier to transport through it, it needs to be relatively big. This is the second use of the negative matter. You see, negative matter isn't like antimatter, as in, it doesn't explode when it touches its matter counterpart. In fact, negative matter actually repels regular matter, making it unable to touch without inserting a big enough of a force. This force was made by the pressure of the air when the Daytron needed to contain the quantum fluctuations, but now it can be used to widen the portal. You see, portals are very unstable when created, and very small too. That's where we use negative matter stabilization. Some of the negative matter is also then used to create a thin shield around the objects which travel with the Daytron in the 4th dimension. But since the universes are so far apart, then how does it go faster if you travel in a straight line in 4D, you might ask? Well, in this 4th dimensional world, there is no friction, and there are no regular particles of the standard model that come to the 4th dimension unless you use the portal. However, in that space, the mechanical and cosmological concepts and rules don't apply, making anything that enters the space unprotected become pushed out. But since negative matter repels regular matter, we can use the quantum fluctuations pressure withheld by the negative matter we need to create enough repelling energy to force the negative matter into the 4th dimension, and thereby pushing out the objects inside the negative matter sphere. This actually creates a huge amount of energy, and to not kill anyone nearby, we take the energy with us to the outer realm, and making it unable to harm anything in our 3D world. For simplicity, we call this explosion repulsion, or ER for short. Now, up until now, I have been glossing over a very important detail, which I now need to clear up. What if I told you the speed at which you travel isn't necessarily how far you travel, at least in the 4th dimension? For example, look how fast Nemo moves with a speed of 6 km per hour in the regular world. And now compare it to how fast he moves at the same speed in the 4D world. In both cases, he has about the same speed, but clearly he's moving at different rates. That's because the distance Nemo moves is actually the square of the speed he moved when he entered the dimension and the regular speed he gains in the 4th dimension. And this speed then depends on how fast he should move in the regular world. The faster he moves, the exponentially faster he should move in this weird 4D plane. Note that this is a rule that emerges due to the 4D world having no rules that at least can be found. In these visuals, blue will represent Nemo's actual speed, and green will represent multiple of which he moves, which we call Nemo's de facto speed. So in these 3 pictures, Nemo has the same speed in the 4D world, but has different de facto speeds, since he entered the dimension with different initial speeds. So, if you want to travel really far, we need to get the relatively small speed in our world, then transfer that to the weird cylinder world, and then gain speed inside if necessary. So, in conclusion, we need to sync up our speed so that the de facto speed is as fast as we want to travel to the other world. And the speed needed to do this is called the warp speed, which is relative to the entering speed, the gain of speed inside 4D, and the time we want to travel. Warp speed is often rounded down to the nearest integer, and the Daytron can take the warp speed as an input instead of the time it takes. So in this diagram, the blue arrow represents the warp speed. When we have that speed, the square of that speed will make us travel the wanted location in 30 seconds. Now, what I'm showing here is actually the only speed at which we can travel to the universe in 30 seconds, aka the speed to move exactly 84 universes in that time. If we increased our speed, the de facto speed would become so fast that we would never come back, since only the 3-dimensional world is looping one way, not the 4th. So in general, any fraction of the warp speed is also a warp speed, just taking more time. There is a cap, however, since if you travel faster than the length between the two universes in the Daytron's reaction time, which is 3 milliseconds, we would end up in empty, dead, and black space. So remember, every warp speed has its own de facto speed for moving in the 4th dimension, which can be tricky sometimes. For example, if you just want to travel to the universe besides you, you need to have a relatively low warp speed. Otherwise, you will miss the universe directly. The easiest way to travel there would be to do a 180 and travel 100 universes forward in modulo 200 and then travel to the universe besides you. This way is more accurate, but it takes up almost twice the energy, which is, if you want to travel back, a long waiting period. Here is a graph showing the warp speeds and the time it would take to traverse both. For the y-axis, I show the universe's number, and on the x-axis, I show the time it would take. The numbers by the nodes indicate how much life would be left if we assume the Daytron has a capacity to hold 420 crystals of life, which right now is the case. The good thing is that while waiting to travel from point A to B, the Daytron sucks up life, which makes it more efficient to travel to a universe on the other side of the cylinder than it would be otherwise. The other problem is trying to speed up in the 4th dimension. You can only do that if your explosion is still with you in some manner, which can only be done if you have the explosion still inside the negative matter sphere, which we don't. Otherwise it would harm everyone inside. Since you're not able to do that, the Daytron needs to be left alone to do the calculation before you travel, which is indicated by it making noise. Speaking of indication, you know the quantum fluctuations are up and running by the time light bends in weird and unpredictable ways, which often happens at the same time as the processing. But since you are unable to change your velocity when you leave the 3D space, it is best to choose the right warp for the travel, or at least the right time. So, what warp are we using for a trip to Universe 18? Well, keep in mind that even with access to unlimited speed, we don't have infinite amounts of life to use up. So to get to that universe without running out of fuel before leaving, we need to take into consideration that we can travel as fast as we want. So this will be our plan. Start by inputting a warp speed or time duration for the journey, then let the machine calculate your speed and force output, and then let the machine magnify the quantum fluctuations while creating negative energy by life to shield the energy. And lastly, leave the machine to let loose of the high pressure by expanding in the negative energy sphere and travel through the portal that is created and leave the explosion to dissipate in the 4th dimension. So this is the graph of two possible routes with the Daytron. Unfortunately, we run into a bit of an issue with the time it will take to traverse to Universe 18. That's because the distance is almost so far away it can be. However, it will take even longer to travel with a stop in the middle, since otherwise we wouldn't have enough life to travel a second time to the final destination. That's why we personally always travel directly to the destination, only risking to maybe die if you want to travel to a universe besides the one we started by. So, by traveling directly to Universe 18, we can see in this new graph with the y-axis showing warp speed and the x-axis showing duration in the 4th dimension that we can travel by any speed we would like, at least from the minimum speed of warp 1 to the maximum of either life used or space traveled. Now, we're almost ready to go back to the video, but there's just some final points I want to make. For example, you don't have to write in the exact warp speed to travel into that universe. When you manually input warp speed, it will be an integer, but then the Daytron uses the best suited exact warp speed decimals to fit your need. The Daytron also functions the same way if you input the time duration, which is in seconds. Now, based on what I've told you, you might think that you can travel perpendicular to the cylinder, but that's not actually true. For example, if the planet you want to travel to isn't directly perpendicular to your position relative to the cylinder, you would end up in outer space. But since you can travel wherever, you don't need to worry about that. Our show may be improbable, but it's not impossible. Separately, if gravitational pull of something strong is nearby your destination or starting point, the trajectory you travel in will be slightly off, but in most cases you don't see that ever happening, because the Daytron actually tries to correct its course when it arrives, by simply using a tiny amount of light to repel matter with. Finally, for simplicity, the set of planets that are in the preset for traveling to a specific universe we call the multiversal ring. And if the Daytron is on the multiversal ring, then we say it's SMR aligned. Remember, moving from one preset to another is easy as pie for the Daytron, since they are presets after all. But anything else requires manual input, and the Daytron's processing to get the numbers right. So, if you're SMR aligned, it's easy to stay that way, and if you're SMR misaligned, it's easy to stay that way as well. Now, if you become SMR misaligned, you need to use a little more life to get the same precision as when you are SMR aligned. Okay, so now we're finally ready to go resume the main video and watch the 4th dimension movement. Just kidding. First I need to explain what these screens are. These extra screens will help you follow along during the teleportation. The standard view is just the view that the camera shows, but since they fixed this camera to a 3D world for video purposes, this screen won't tell you very much. The relative view shows where they are in the 4D space, where one of the dimensions has been collapsed to make the video possible to watch. The relative map also shows where they are in 4D space, but from an overhead perspective. And finally, the SMR map shows where I am in the SM ring. Okay, so now let's really start. So, as I explained earlier, you navigate with the high pressure explosion using the negative matter that we extrapolated, and I've marked the explosion impact on the relative map so you can try to not look at explosions. So, basically, you travel in a straight line and just wait for the trip to hopefully reach its endpoint. Using what I taught you, you should be able to follow along with their movement. For example, they are able to change their trajectories when entering 3D space again, since the gravity from entering the universe is interfered just a little with this path. In the end, however, you travel so far that any tiny change gets magnified, so the Daytron tries to calculate for this issue as good as it can before leaving. Remember, they need to be in the non-matterless 3D universe to be able to move with their own force. As you may have noticed for the time, the light refracts in weird ways when inside the 4D world. Since it also has no speed limit in general, light actually is able to get across to your eyes even when traveling really fast. This is actually the cause for why we don't often record inside the 4D world, because then, the camera lens will be attacked by all of the light from the negative matter, which humans cannot see, and therefore not get harmed by. Okay, so now we're closing in on the end. The final thing the Daytron does is to repel itself with the negative matter to be able to correct its course. That movement will bring them to the wanted position, and because this uses little energy, they may also be able to have enough energy for a home trip as well. And since this repelling force is proportional to the mass of the transport, it's best to be lightweight. As said, the Daytron also gains life under the whole trip. So in the end, they may be able to cancel out the energy output for the placement's correction with the gained energy from the trip. Okay, now don't blink. And there you go. By finally releasing the negative matter to be engulfed by the portal it sustained, they got just enough speed to land safely onto the landmark which was wanted. Here we show a microwave lens version of the quantum magnification, in case the earlier view was too boring to watch. As you can see, the objects in a near proximity actually get sucked in a tiny amount due to the gravitational pull of the pressure holding the fluctuations. And here I show an alternate angle of the teleportation into Universe 18. The negative matter actually started to evaporate directly, since it was only stabilized in the real world by life, and there you have it, creating time paradoxes in an afternoon done in 0.5 videos. Man, I didn't expect this video to become 24 minutes long when I started commentating, but I guess there was just that much to explain. Hopefully you were able to follow along with my explanations and visuals, learned something new, and had an enjoyable experience. So, thanks for watching.